Hi, everybody. Welcome to Chill Pill. Sláinte Ruth.
Sláinte.
Hope your day's going well. I tell you that a lot of leaves are coming down right now.
Yes, and blowing about.
Well, yeah, not today because it's pretty still, but...
Yeah. We looked out.
It was windy, though.
We looked out and saw all the leaves on the street blowing into our garden.
Well, that's true. So
yesterday.
Sunday was terrible.
Or Sunday, was it?
Yeah, all the leaves from everywhere blow over onto this yard.
Because we've got the corner lot.
Yeah, you get it all cleaned up, and then all of a sudden, poof, it's all there.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Butch Leedy gave me a nice device. You can pull it around with the grass,
Thank you, Butch.
with the cutter, grass mower, and picks the leaves up.
Mm-hmm.
But it only picks smaller leaves up. You can't really go over big, heavy.
Well, there's still some leaves I've got to drop.
I know. It's going to be a while.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, you've got the health and strength to do it, right?
Yes.
Anyway, we're going to read a few verses today. Actually, we're going to talk about this. We've decided to talk about this for a few weeks because there's so much good stuff in this, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And it's that famous passage where it's about there's a time for everything. And it says, to everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search, and a time to count as lost. A time to keep, and a time to discard. A time to tear, and a time to mend. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. These things are really interesting. A time for war, and a time for peace. So what we're going to do is...
Covers everything.
Yeah, we're going to take one or two of these for the next number of weeks and talk about them because it's really interesting. So let's start out. We're not necessarily going to start out from the first one, but we'll just talk about various ones as we go along. So let's pick up on this one first for today. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. So in other words, there's a time... You could use that word embrace in different ways, of course, giving someone a hug, or you could look at it in a more, a different way, more of a symbolic way, and a time to not embrace. What does that say to you?
Well, first of all, COVID. We're not allowed to embrace
right
now.
It's a time to refrain.
This is a time
from
to
embracing.
Not hug. We're not allowed to hug right now. But that's what you say, that's the literal meaning of it.
Yeah.
That there's times when it's we should be hugging and other times when we shouldn't. And right now we're not allowed to hug.
Okay.
But symbolically, to embrace means to accept something. And there are times to accept something and times you shouldn't accept things. And I feel that we can lose our way sometimes when we accept things that we shouldn't.
Yeah. So it's like today, someone who's listening may be accepting something in their life, you know, embracing it, welcoming it, but maybe they shouldn't.
No. And it could be a person, it could be things that a person's doing to you, and you really should not accept it. Sometimes children, you know, are out of order too. And we're slow as parents sometimes, or grandparents, to go against that and say, no, you shouldn't do that, you know, that's not good behavior. And so then if we accept things that we shouldn't, then what happens is it turns into a very hurtful situation. In the case of kids, they grow up and they don't know how to behave, and that's not a good situation for them or for anybody else.
What would you say, like as a mum, you know, when our kids were little and stuff, and you know, for example, say if you're disciplining a child's been doing something they shouldn't, and maybe they've been drawing on the walls or whatever, and you have to discipline them, and then they cry and they want a hug. What would you do in that situation? Is that a time to refrain? Is it time to reinforce the discipline? Or is it time to just, still hug them? Because sometimes, you know, some parents can get really too soft on that issue with their kids. They'll just let them away with anything, and yeah, everything's okay. You're a good kid, and maybe they've not been a good kid.
I think every situation's different, and the thing as a parent, as well as disciplining and all of that, is getting to know your child. I think that was the biggest shock for me. You have these babies, and then they start growing. You think you know everything about them, and then all of a sudden they're growing up and they're becoming their own person. And you look at and you watch them, and you're like, why did they do that? I have no idea. Or you see some kind of attitudes and behaviors, and you think, I would never have done that. Like, why did they do that? And so the thing is, we have to understand that each of our children, and then ultimately grandchildren, great grandchildren, and so on, we're all individuals before God. And so just because it's your child or grandchild doesn't mean you understand everything about them. You have to get to know them. So sometimes a hug is not giving in or being weak, it's reinforcing when that individual needs that reinforcement.
Right.
Like, in other words, to help them understand that I'm disciplining you, but that doesn't mean I don't love you.
Right.
In fact, it means I do love you, and I want you to grow up well. So helping children navigate the difference and understanding, because even God disciplines us in our lives.
Yes.
And He loves us more than anybody could ever love us. So if God disciplines us, then we should discipline the people that we love. And I think just what we started off this conversation is helping our children and grandchildren understand what they also should embrace,
right,
and what they shouldn't embrace in life by what we reinforce in their lives.
Right. I think you could always say that, say if it's a family member that's doing something that you don't want, in terms of embracing something or not, I think you can always differentiate between, I love you, but I'm not accepting this behavior.
Right.
Of course, these are days where a lot of people think there's not a lot of abuse going on anymore. We've grown up past all that, but it's just not true. There's an awful lot of abuse. And one of the biggest abuses that goes on in between couples or parents and their kids is like emotional. Yelling and screaming, putting them down, calling someone stupid or a loser. And you see that in the playground. Kids are a lot more verbal about that kind of thing. Adults sometimes not so much out in public, but behind closed doors people do a lot of stuff. So it's like you've got to call it. It's like some people accept a much lower level than they actually should, because they think they're not worth it. It's almost like, I'll accept this behavior from you. I'll accept how you're treating me right now and how you're behaving towards me, because perhaps I feel that's all I'm worth. And then a lot of times then you get, especially like in couples, they get used to then a certain type of behavior from that person, because they've never really said, no, I'm not accepting that.
Challenged it.
Yeah, I'm not embracing that behavior. This is not something I'm going to accept. And therefore they get kind of, after a while, really discouraged and like, I need out of this, because they haven't really said to that person, look, this is who I am, this is what I want, and I'm not accepting that.
And that's why ultimately it can end up in sad relationships, broken relationships, silent relationships. We can lose our way in a relationship because we don't stand up for who we are and what's right and wrong in a situation. And that's the same. Look, just because you have children does not mean they get to badmouth you, talk back to you, and you just say, well, I'm their mom. Hello, yes, you're their mom. You're the one who gave them, pushed them out into this life. And so I feel like it's important to understand who we are as people, and expecting other people to respect us is a good thing, because it keeps us healthy in a relationship and keeps the relationship healthy and moving forward. The minute somebody, whether it's a marriage or parenting or grandparent, the minute somebody silences themselves in a relationship, that relationship starts to break.
Yeah. And then some people survive that for years and years and years, but then they're, like you say, they're just, they've lost themselves too. It's almost like they can't find their way and they're used to it. but they don't like it and have never spoken up and said, no, I don't want to be talked to that way. No, I don't want to be treated that way. No, I don't like it when you do this.
And the whole embracing thing, I mean, you could take that into a time to embrace, a time not to embrace, whether you're in the work world, a professional environment, and people are asking you to do things that you know are morally or ethically wrong.
Yeah.
Don't do it. That's the time to not embrace it. If you belong to the Lord, stand up for what's right and say, no, I can't go along with that. That's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And honestly, if we had more people doing this in the world would not be in such the state it is.
It's like I'm not going to run with the mob.
Right.
Just because the mob's saying this, I ain't going that direction.
And it can be very hard
to
swim against the stream as we talk about it.
Right.
It can be very hard because from that moment on, you've identified yourself. Now people are looking at you and they know who you are. There's a big responsibility with that, with standing up for the right thing, standing up for who you are. That's a big responsibility, but we need to take that on because relationships and environments need to be healthier and need to be running better. And that can only happen when people know when to embrace, when not to embrace.
Yeah. Hey, good being with you today.
Yes.
Pip, pip.
And
cheerio.